Welcome to the Leaders Cafe by Transform Me. I am super excited to host the 19th edition of the Leaders Cafe. Uh, we've been helping organizations and leaders bring about transformation for about 12 years now. We've had the fortune of working with about 200 organizations globally. And about a couple of years back, about 2.5 years back, we were having this conversation with one of the leaders that we were coaching. And she said, you guys have access to such great minds that you work with. Why don't you bring in their conversations and their perspectives through a forum for others to pick up threads from? And that is really what started off the essence of the Leaders Cafe about 1.5 years back. And we've been blessed, and I'm super grateful. We've had some amazing leaders and speakers come in and share their views on topics that are important. And that really is the mission that we have around Leaders Cafe, which is to bring conversations that matter with opinions that matter, to really help and serve our community of listeners, all of you who are logged in, who are watching this either live or will be watching this and in a recorded format. Our intent is to bring in those conversations for you, to help you think through some of the things that you may be struggling with, you may be working through. So 19th edition of Leaders Cafe, and what we are discussing in the Leaders Cafe today is really a very interesting topic around why nurturing first-time managers. Why nurturing first-time managers is so super critical to business success. And it's not a topic that's new to many of you. Many of you have heard about it. Many of you have struggled with it. Many of you have solved for it. But there are new dimensions in this space that we wanted to bring, and perspectives that we wanted to bring, and dialogues that we wanted to bring up. And to bring color to this conversation and to bring perspective and insights to this conversation, I am super excited to introduce our speaker, our guest for today. We have somebody who has had over 3 decades of experience, if I'm not calculating it wrong, over 3 decades of experience, which includes over 6 years with the armed forces and over 2 decades of corporate experience. Somebody who's held senior roles in the HR fraternity, senior HR leadership roles, somebody who's been heavily regarded, recognized as a thought leader in the space of people practices and HR. Please welcome the Group CHRO of Make My Trip, Mr. Yuvraj Srivastava. Yuvraj, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Yatik. Great to be here. And thanks to you and your team for really getting me to speak to your audience. I think, as you said, super excited. I am also equally super excited to really be part of this conversation and see how can I really share some learnings and some thought which can be of help to your audience. So thank you so much for inviting me, Yatik. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant, Yuvraj. And I have to be honest with you, my team has been trying to find a way to connect with you for a few months. It took us a little longer. You're not an easy person to get to, but it took us a while. But we are finally here, and I know you're super busy, but you still made time for this. We're really excited, Yuvraj, especially because this topic, and you and I were earlier talking a couple of weeks back when you had a brief chat, and I know you mentioned that it's interesting that you picked up this topic because it's not really a new problem for organizations. It's been a known, I wouldn't even say problem, it's been a known reality, known challenge for a decade or 2 decades, but yet it continues to be a persistent problem or persistent reality. And I think our viewers, I'm very hopeful, and I'm very certain, actually, not hopeful, that our viewers are going to walk out today with some perspectives, at least, if not answers, around this topic. But maybe what I'll begin with is just a broad-based, would love to get your insights and view on the situation, because you're obviously the Group CHRO of Make My Trip, and you see this from very close quarters, and I know you've driven initiatives around this through your team. Would love your perspectives on this, because recently Bloomberg did a survey, and there are many such surveys that have happened in the last 2 decades, and this survey about the fact that 1 in 5 employees lose sleep over a first-time manager. Such a powerful statement. 1 in 5 employees lose sleep over a first-time manager, and they cite things like anxiety, lack of motivation, sleeplessness, and other effects of unprepared managers as a, why they want to quit kind of a thing. So despite all of this happening, and the fact that this problem has been known, why do you think this continues to be a persistent challenge for many organizations? What are your views around this problem or this reality, first of all?
So I think uh, even if I don't completely concur with the study, I think that I would not rule out the basic assumption there, Gatik. I think first time manager or other managerial capability is something which have been spoken for many years. I think since the time industries came in, and somewhere we do hear that people lose their managers, not the company, and that's how it all really works. I think so. First thing is it's very critical and important to have a managerial support for people who come into the organization, because organization hires. There's a certain team which basically gets people into the system, and then what happens? I always call it as a kanyadan sort of a thing done by HR of a newcomer coming into the organization and handed over to the departments to really groom, take care, and also work with that individual, right?
I
And
like that, by
finally,
the way, the Kikadan terminology. I've
and
never heard that
and
before, but I
and,
like
and
that.
and you know what happens if the fellow does well, if the person does well, credit goes to the department or the function for grooming that person in well, and if the person is not done well, perhaps it said that it was not a right hire sort of a thing. But who should really walk with that individual when the person joins the organization? I'm taking it as a generic term for the first time managers as well as managers. What
Sure.
has happened is uh, I think many times organization bandwidth is limited, and there are certain sections of people who are taken for, if not granted, rather they are assumed to be knowing what they are supposed to be knowing in the organizational culture. uh, Most of the time, that famous principle, Gatik, which says that people rise to their level of incompetence. You promote
Industry.
people because they have done well in their current role, and you assume the person will also do better job in the next role, while you keep in mind that Peter's principle, but you forget, if that's the reality, there has to be an effort from the organization side and from people's side to ensure that fellows hand is held while the journey is being completed. And I also look at it, why it is important is that if you look at, take a simile of a hourglass. Hourglass has two bulbs on both sides, and it has a thin neck in between. And the neck is one which basically allows sand to pass from one side to the other side. I always feel that first time managers, or managers for that matter, are the neck of the organization, or a spine of the organization, or midriff of the organization, which basically connects the top and bottom uh, to make it an efficient machinery to operate. And why we take these folks for granted most of the time is that we assume that there's a prior knowledge and information which is available with that individual. We also feel that uh, I think we can take care of these folks later. Let's first focus on the base frontline, which is larger in
Mhm.
number, the top level, which is a leadership cadre. If you train these top and below, I think rest everything will fall in the place. But my feeling is that this mid level, the midriff, or a spine, or a neck, whatever you want to call it, is the one which holds the organization together. If that sense starts getting into the minds of people, people will start creating uh, leaders at that level, because they have a resonance both sides. And in the milieu of so many things happening, we forget to take care of them. And interestingly, you'll see, Gatek, also it's one thing which I have observed. uh, Most of the guys who are deployed at that type of a role in field away from the headquarters get still slightly
Oh,
neglected. If you are in a large corporate office wherein you get promoted as a first time manager, you still have a lot of people to interact and work with. But imagine the guys who are in the region, the sales workforce, business development workforce, and all. I think that if they get promoted, out of sight, out of mind, many times happens in most of the organizations. Uh,
True.
so as I said, bringing this together, if you feel they are important element, they are the ones who are pass current on both sides in the organization, top and down. Uh, they need to be worked with the principle that they have done well in their current role. The next role they needs to be handheld. Uh,
Yeah.
I think will make a lot of difference to the organization if that mindset basically starts working. And I
Yeah.
to end my thought here on this, that there are 30 almost 25 to 30% people sit in that level, almost
Yep.
25 to 30% people who are the first time managers or the mid-level managers or the early managers. uh, and if that part of the engine is not working properly or is tentative, then perhaps it has its own effect on the entire organizational culture, learning, performance, productivity, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting, and thanks for opening up this dialogue, Yuvraj. And I've already taken away a few things. So one, Kanyadan, I'm never going to forget that. And I also love the analogy that you portrayed about that hourglass, and the connection between the top and the bottom. That's critical. And it's what's interesting is that's perhaps the most sensitive part of the hourglass as well, and we've got to be
Yeah,
really careful with.
absolutely, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
that kind of the point that you made, and I connect with that about prioritization, right? Because
Yeah,
limited bandwidth of organization, focusing on succession planning and top leaders, this kind of going with an assumed thing that they will figure it out, they will learn it, and this is a mistake many of us have made. And I'm curious to get your views on this space of uh, because if you go back 20 years, and I'm sure you've seen that, if you go back 20 years, 25 years, in most corporates, other than a few that were really forward looking organizations, 20, 25 years back, even succession planning would often be an afterthought, right? And, even
yeah,
things like developing a leadership pipeline was something that people would
yeah,
start doing once it was almost too late when you're in a crisis situation. So I think the problem has been more about, in my view at least, has been more about being reactive rather than proactive. And now, 20
yeah,
years down the line, it seems to me that many organizations have become proactive at the top level. Many organizations, at least the organizations we work with, I think that shifted from being reactive to proactive in the last 10, 15 years. But
yeah.
with first-time managers, we continue to be reactive. So, do you feel that it's just a natural progression of time? Are we waiting for it to happen? Or, I think the more important question that our viewers would love to hear your perspective on is, if because some of our viewers are going to be bound to be learning managers, L&D managers, HR
Yeah, yeah,
managers, business
yeah.
leaders, and I'm sure they're curious about this question, that how can we become proactive in the way we are developing first time managers in our organization? Are there any tips? Are there any suggestions? Are there any thoughts that you have around how can we proactively build our first
Sure,
time managers? What are your thoughts there?
sure. It's an interesting question, Gatik. I think that let me first react to your first thought, what you said that 20, 25 years back, people were far more planned, right? That's what you said. That, in terms of succession today, perhaps people, or rather, today people are more planned, and earlier people were not planned. I think it should be other way around, Gatik. And I believe in that. Why I say this? Go back 25, 30 years, Gatik. You will see that organizations were very, very, uh, you know, uh, conscious about their own work culture, and they wanted to really train and groom people within their own culture, and they wanted to have people coming from the ranks to also fill up senior positions, and also availability of talent on those specific skills used to be at times a challenge. That's why you'll see most of the bigger organizations will always have a plan, that whether they should have succession planning or not. I think in today's world, it's not important that you need to groom talent within your own system. You can also hire talent which is already groomed in a sort of a similar environment elsewhere in the market, in the talent market. If you look at e-com companies, there are many e-com companies, there are many startups who more or less work with a similar sort of thought process, that agility is important, speed to the customer is important. Right first time may not be right, but done is better than perfect. I think many organizations follow those principles, and also the number of organizations which have come up and working with a similar sort of a principles and policies are far in number as compared to earlier one, right? So now it's important for you to do hire well. hire people who can really fit into your system. Skills you will still get in the market. Earlier, it
Hmm.
used to be a combination of skills as well as culture fit. Currently, I think if you could look at the culture fit, hire a person. Skills, I think a person has developed elsewhere doesn't matter. So now the world is a global platform. Organizations are flat. Every organization seamlessly enters into other organizations' domain. So planning on a succession today has become slightly more become easier than the past. So I think that is something which is interesting which has happened, and I think
Yeah.
in light of that we should develop people when it comes to first time manager. Then I don't think that you need to focus on functional skills as such. You need to focus on developing these managers to teach them that what works in the organization. Please go back and
Hmm.
teach your team members that what how to succeed in the organization, what are the success mantras in the organization, what are do's and don'ts of the organization, rather than really telling a person that how do you need to operate and do your work. People are coming with those skills. So that is point number one. And other thing what you said is that what are the tips. In fact, I was thinking, and I don't think that I can take the credit of what I'm going to talk about. uh, it's something which I thought today in the morning. I was thinking, Gatik, I have a conversation. Let me figure out what do we really do in terms, and what
Yeah.
do I really believe in terms of a first time manager. So I looked at role of a first time manager, and why I'm telling you this is uh, any organization which is training first time managers should ensure that these five basic commandments or elements are imbibed into that individual, and that person works with that sort of an approach. Role of a first time manager, what does he do? If you look at 5 I as an alphabet: inform, initiate, involve, indulge, and ignite. So 5 I's: inform, initiate, involve, indulge, and ignite. When I run a session, I say that, hey, as a first time manager, these are 5 things what you need to do. Inform means in case somebody is coming new into your system, please help that fellow know the organization. Inform him
Right.
who's what. Inform who to really work with in what manner. What are the vulnerable areas in the organization? What are the cultural ethos? Inform that individual. When you become a first time manager, first go and tell your people that who you are. Inform them about yourself, how you like to operate. So role of an information is important. Second is initiate people to succeed, initiate people to think, initiate people into into conversation as a manager, initiate people to really come out of their hesitations. I think how do you really initiate them and get them off the uh, you know uh, running block to take on onto the track. Involve is basically involve them in the decision making, involve them
Hmm.
in the conversation, view their perspectives very closely, and ensure that you are inclusive in your behavior. Fourth, what I say is indulge. Indulge means take care. Take them out for a
Hmm.
coffee. Take them out for a drink. Indulge in the sense, do some friendly banter, pull leg
Hmm.
at times, show your side of humor, talk about their family, talk about what works, what doesn't work, show your own personal, uh, vulnerabilities, humane
Hmm.
side. Indulge with them. And last one is what I said: ignite that passion for the organization, ignite that zeal to work, ignite that that way and vision about one's own career. So if you, as a first time manager, as an organization, you teach people that go and do these five, don't do anything else. You are a manager, you are responsible for set of 3 4 5 6 people. Inform them, initiate them, involve them, indulge with them, and ignite them for
Ignite that.
taking higher
Yeah.
heights. It works, and I think if you look at this framework, it works. It works. And when I'm trying to retrofit what we do, what I would have spoken to people, it somewhere starts fitting into that area. Then learners and the professionals should really look at this as a biggest aspect. And also, as I said earlier, uh, it's not important always to look for ROIs, Gatik.
Hmm.
Every time when we try to look at training as a
Ah,
function,
thank you very
we're
much for
talking
saying
about
that, Yuvraj. All.
People keep talking about ROI, ROI. What is the ROI? I don't think in life everything is governed by ROI. In
Mm,
life, everything is not about being objective. At times,
mm,
it's also important to feel good and make people feel good. It's equally important than really putting everything in numbers.
yeah.
Organizations might not be spending much of time on first time managers training because it says ROI kya aane wala hai iska. But I don't think the day you start looking at ROI very intently, you become very skeptical whether you'll achieve it or not. If you just focus on developing good human beings and good Samaritans in the organization who are your champions and ambassadors, I think you would have done a great job in terms of developing leaders there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think, especially going back to a couple of things that you said, Yuvraj, that I picked up. One, I loved what you said that when we were talking about proactive versus reactive building, and I think the first point that I picked from you is that don't worry too much about building functional stuff, or not even, you didn't even talk about the power skills of the soft skills. You said really what first time managers need to learn and what we need to be supporting them with is how do they succeed in this organization and how can they help others succeed in the organization, and how can we get that. And to me that's really contextual development, and that's the point that you're bringing in, that first time managers need to be developed contextually. How do you succeed in this
Correct.
organization? The skills are
Correct.
across now, you pick up the skills and all. It's really
Correct.
about how do you develop
Correct.
them contextually. I also love the
Correct.
5I. It is broad and it's really about developing them: inform, initiate, involve, indulge, ignite. I'd like to add a sixth one to that, which is part of our belief at Transform Me, that everything begins with I. And
Yeah.
I would call it maybe introspect, because I feel one of the things that we've seen helping a lot of managers and first time managers, leaders, is really the ability to develop their level of self awareness. Because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
one of the unique challenges that first time managers face, and I don't think much is done about it, is um, how you stand up from your peers. And when you become a first time
Hmm.
manager, the complexity is quite interesting, because you're now suddenly managing, in that word, managing people who are your friends and who are your colleagues. And for that, that level of
Hmm.
emotional maturity, some level of emotional maturity, awareness becomes super critical. So love that.
Hmm.
Thanks for sharing that, Raj, the 5I.
Yeah.
And uh, in my mind, I've added a sixth small one to that, with your permission. And the one of the other things that we hear a lot of our clients talk to us about, and I'd love to get your views on it, because I know some people are solving for it quite beautifully, and some people are
Mm-hmm.
struggling with it. We've seen both sides, and realities are different. But I was having a chat with this one of this business leaders, again in an e-commerce company, interestingly, Yuvraj.
Mm-hmm.
And in the nature of an e-commerce company is really fast-paced, fast-moving, changes by
Yeah.
the hour, by the days, a lot of bias for action, a lot of movement, and so on and so forth. And we were building out a first-time manager journey for them, and they said, I think the complexity has tripled. I said, what do you mean? They said it's triple complexity. I said, what do you mean by
Mm-hmm.
triple complexity? Help me understand. He said, number one. So he said, I'll tell you the triple. Number one is that first-time managers is an age-old problem, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a problem since time immemorial, so to say, right? Which you also acknowledge. Number two, the workforce has changed. So while the problem is old, now the workforce has changed. The workforce is new. So we've got millennials coming
Mm-hmm.
in, and the realities are also different. We've got hybrid working and stuff like that happening. So
Yeah.
number one,
Yeah.
age-old problem. Number two, new realities with millennials and hybrid working. And number three, the pace of work is like never before. The pace of change and the pace of work is like never before. So he said, this is what I'm calling the triple complexity: age old problem, new realities, and pace of work increasing. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it also creates its own dynamics, right? Because we've heard a lot of people talk about today, first time managers lack role models, because in the hybrid environment, it's very difficult for them to find role models, and role models also have become far and few between for a variety of reasons. So, all of those complexities. I'm curious to understand how, what is your view, or how Make My Trip has tried to solve for it, or how you're trying to solve for it. What are your views on this triple complexity, and what can people do to kind of navigate through this?
Okay. Again, I think interesting. Let me attempt to answer maybe a bit disjointed, but I'm sure at the end of it, something should really come out of what we
Please,
talk
please.
on this question. While I earlier said, Gatik, uh, that you need to get people into the system who are culturally aligned, because functional skills can really get developed anywhere, right? One thing which has changed in the current context of those triple complexity is that gone are the days when the millennials and new people would always look at the role models. Not necessarily they'll look for the role models, right? They would look for somebody whom they can learn from. And why? Because they feel knowledge is power in today's world. Charisma of a leader is a thing of passe, or maybe in certain functions it will work. But currently, it's more important for a leader to have functionally competent. And if the person is functionally competent, he generates followership, right? Because millennials, new age employees, I'll not say new age employees, or the current sort of people would mostly look at guidance on the functional areas. And there are three rules how you really derive, uh, power. One is a position power. I make you CEO or an MD, you might be anything for that matter. You'll have power. Another one is personality power, wherein you have a charisma, and third one is a knowledge power. At some point of time, position and charisma used to work. Charisma can still work in some of the functions, but in the today's knowledge world, the power which basically works is a knowledge power, and people look for leaders who can solve for them, who can guide them, who can mentor them, who can tell them what
Mm.
needs to be done, rather than just saying go and find out your answer. Because uh, you must have heard nowadays a lot of people say my team is smarter than me. It's a way
Yeah.
of saying that I'm working with the folks who are damn capable, right? They can challenge me,
Mm.
they can ask me questions, and it shows that they are not going to get affected by your great speech. They are going to get affected in case you can tell them three ways of solving a problem. So that's the functional skills. I think important is that when you look at first time managers or the leaders at the mid level, ensure that you are looking at people who can help people do well and set them for success. That is one thing which is important. I think another important element is that when you are working on complexities, you have to first ensure that you drive learnings around trust and accountability. I'll connect this with your thought of hybrid working, fast
Yeah.
pace. If you continue to operate with a mindset that "Yeah, I need to monitor everything, if I need to really review everything, I need to be very sure of anything which goes off out of my function or department unless I have seen it, then what you are doing, you are not having trust on people, and you are not in position to leave people to do what they need to do, and also at times fail and then learn. You are still
Mm.
operating with that mindset of earlier control driven leadership or managerial skills, rather than really empowering and delegating. And in empowering and delegating is a skill are these skills which are relevant in this context of triple complexity. You have to trust people to let them do what they are. Third element is, which is connected with trust itself. Trust cannot really build unless you build accountability in the rank and file. When you
Mm.
are working in a hybrid, you can't tell me, Yuvraj, I am your manager, partner, you go and do these things and be at home for 3 days. I think I can't come and tell Gatik after 3 days, hey Gatik, I couldn't really do it. I'm accountable
Right.
for that. So I need to be far more prompt in telling Gatik after every day that what the progress is. And that's accountability. How you really keep people informed that what's happening. So while Gatik is trusting me that I'm working at home and I'm away in a remote location, Yuvraj is also behaving in a very accountable manner of keeping him informed. So this connection of trust and accountability is again an element of really being driven as a cultural fabric in the organization, or the individual's ways of working. While leaders should have trust, the manager should have trust, people under them should also start demonstrating more accountability. So this triple complexity gets fixed by ensuring that you are working with the leaders who have strong functional skills, because
Mm.
in complex work you have to solve issues. You drive trust and accountability wherever it is needed, and then let the speed of work continue. That may not really affect much, but I think if you continue to operate from the earlier mindset, you'll not be in position to operate as a manager in the current environment. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. No, that's really powerful, and I very different take, Yuvraj, on what you said about role modeling. And I honestly hadn't thought about it like this because I had often been, and I still am. So I'm still absorbing what you said. It's a very different perspective that first-time managers are not looking for role models in the traditional way that people have looked up to role models, right? A leader who has charisma, a leader who has influence, a leader who has power. But then maybe, and it's a very interesting concept because a thought that maybe this, uh, for lack of a better word, generation of managers and leaders get inspired by role models who are really strong, competent leaders, functionally
Yes,
competent leaders. So very,
absolutely.
very interesting dynamic. And
And
yeah,
and you know where
yeah,
it comes from?
yeah,
Where it comes from, Gatek? It comes from the fact that the generation is aspirational. They want to do well. They
yeah,
are not happy. Why the attritions are happening? Why people are not staying in one job for longer? Because they're ambitious, they're aspirational.
yeah,
They don't want to get caught into that warp of working with the leaders and all. I'll work with a leader who can really help me know five more languages and can help me
mm,
develop some more impactful projects, rather than really going and having a drink with the person every day in the evening and saying he's a very charismatic leader. So I think generations also, if you look around, you'll realize that youngsters are very different. Not that
mm,
they'll get we used to get inspired by Sunil Gavaskar and Kapil Dev in our age, and whatever, even if they used to get out on zero, it's like, "Okay, yeah, I think there was something wrong." But nowadays
mm.
people are very, very discerning, and they decipher how people are operating, and that's important.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're right. Because the expectations of what should be the right leader have also changed, perhaps, in the minds of these
Yeah.
managers. So that's an interesting perspective. So three things I'm picking away from you in terms of how this triple complexity can be managed by organizations. One, ensure that leaders display strong competence and use that as their uh,
Yes, yes,
tool to be role models. So strong, display strong competence by leadership. Number two, build strong trust and accountability. And I understand the linkage between the two.
yes, yes,
And third is you spoke about empowering them and not being kind of breathing down their neck kind of a thing. So very,
yes,
very interesting. Love, especially the first point. I love it, which is strong, display strong competence rather than strong charisma. So I think it's a
yes.
very bold statement you're making because I'm sure some people right now are listening, really, but I like it because I think it's a very fresh perspective, and that's why
No,
we
fair
wanted
enough.
to in this
I know,
dialogue.
I know. I normally think that unless you challenge the conventional wisdom, you'll not be in position to reach to a thought which can be experimented. And I have personally seen this. I work with the youngsters. I have around 60% of the population of the young engineers coming from different organizations. I think you go into the lift, they'll not even recognize you. That who are you? I think that you may be a chief business officer, but they are in their own world. They are not affected by that. But yes, if you talk to them sense, they'll say, "Hey, this guy talks sense, and he has added some value in the conversation or helped me grow." So I think, yeah, it may be uh, bold, but I think that is how it should be.
Yeah. No, but it's making sense. The more I'm listening to you and absorbing, it's making sense. So thanks for sharing that perspective. Love it. So strong competence, really important. So we just have a few more minutes, Yuvraj. I wanted to kind of bring it down to the one last question, and then we'll open up to some Q&A coming up from the group. Uh,
Yeah,
Actually, there is a couple of questions that are coming here, which I think could be a good segue into some of the things that I wanted to ask. So maybe we will pop up one or two of these questions, Yuvraj, and that will kind of
yeah,
be a good segue to the question I was also asking and save us some time.
sure, sure.
So we have a question coming in from Sudipta. I'll just pop it up on the screen for you as well. He says, if there's a new joinee and also a first-time manager who's going to lead a team, how do you ensure that that joinee is set up for success? What sort of specifically check-in mechanisms, Yuvraj, should we have or do you have as the person tries to settle in into the new role? I remember reading this book a while back, the first 90 days kind of a thing, right? So great question,
Hmm,
I think,
hmm.
because about those check-in mechanisms in the initial period. So, love to hear your views on that, Yuvraj.
I think it's an interesting question, Sudhita. Thanks a lot for asking it. What you are asking is that if both of them are new, uh, who helps whom, sort of a thing. Uh, I think one is that in organization like ours and most of the organizations, relatively hierarchies are flatter. You know, when it comes to relationships in terms of a hierarchy, I think it is more administrative and also to guide people and help people succeed. But when it comes to monitor, review, interact, add value, in classical today's organization, people do work at least 3 levels down, 3 levels up together. That's how the roll ups happen. So I think if the first time manager is there and then he also has a team member, he or she has a team member who's also relatively new, the fellow who is above that first time manager, who's again his manager, is supposed to be really taking care of both of them to succeed. And also interesting thing what we do, Gatik is and Sudipta, in our case we have a very strong HR business partnering structure. I think our HR business partners are uh, very empowered, and they are also on top of things what's happening in the functions and the business teams. I think they are the ones who sense. We also have internal ways of really picking up pulse from employees on. So the new joiners give feedback to us online after 15 days, 30 days, 90 days, and these are different questions which are connected with that tenuity rather than really asking very esoteric questions at that point of time. So you have your ways of checking pulse, and you as a system and process ensure that the manager's manager is responsible to help both the people succeed. And there'll be many situations like this which will come into the system, right? And with the help of having some review mechanisms, with the help of pulse surveys, business partners, you try to get the pulse of such situations and help people. So, and I think with the help of mentoring, talking to people, individual conversations, you ensure that these things doesn't become impediment for either of them for that matter.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've just validated through what you shared, Yuvraj. Thanks for that. That it is super critical to have those check-in mechanisms in
Yeah.
place by various shapes, forms, manners to ensure that the person is settling in. I think that's really itself a great point. And I'm going to pick up one last question in the interest of time, Yuvraj. We have a question coming up from Anand, who has a question, but maybe we can expand on that a little bit because Anand is obviously talking about why don't organizations pay attention to EI, which is so pivotal. And maybe if we can expand the question to not just EI, why don't they have EI? What role do you see EI playing for first time managers? If I can expand on your question, Anand. And Yuvraj, this may take you back to your 5 eyes because somewhere there was that answer was kind of there, but I'll leave you to it.
I think uh, there are certain things overtly work in the organization. There are certain things covertly work in the organization. I think if you say that let's drive a program around I think what will you do in that program? I'm sure that somebody will be great in terms of creating a module around it, but there are certain things which are fabric of the organization, right? And you work on those things more in terms of positive reinforcements and also looking at consequences of those not being demonstrated. So in case you look at an organization which is compassionate and caring by its own value system, like in Make My Trip we have a three biggest values: care, curious, and creative. So when we say care is all about emotional intelligence, and in every conversation we will talk about this. And we believe that if you are not caring, you will not be a good customer centric employee or a team member. So I think there are certain things which are a part of the fabric of the organization which gets built over a period of time in terms of culture, by demonstration of behavior by the leaders, and also looking at the behaviors which are rewarded within the organization. So I'll say in our case, I think emotional intelligence, compassion is demonstrated wherever it is needed. And I think that basically will have a rub off effect on everybody around. Evaluating that whether organizations are paying focus to this or not may be a statement which may lack data for that matter, but I'm saying that it becomes a somewhere a string of pearls within the organizational value system, wherein you reward and recognize these things, and I think on EI is not something which can really be trained very, very deeply to individuals. EI is a skill which people are born with, and I think that the degree of that, increment on that and decrement on that, basically happens over a period of time. The type of ecosystem you work with, everybody will have a bit of it. When you hire, when you look at people, when you promote people, if you have a parameter when you also look at compassion, care, and emotional intelligence, ability to handle conflict, ability to handle uh, dissonance in the system, ability to handle stress, which is a part of EI, I think 80% people in your workforce will have a reasonably higher level of EI. And then if you keep reiterating it with a demonstrated behavior, I think it keeps getting reinstituted or reestablished in the organization. That's how I look at it.
No, I love that. Again, a very fresh perspective because what I'm hearing you say, here's what I took up from what you said, Yuvraj, in response to Anand's thought and question, is that AI is not necessarily something that has to be taught, but it's really the cultural fabric of an organization that has to be where people understand it through experience, reinforcement, and demonstration, right?
That's right.
Experience, reinforcement, and demonstration is what I heard you say. And when it becomes that, and added to that, you said when you start measuring and rewarding people on things like ability to handle conflict and
Yes,
all,
yes, yes.
that's when you building an ecosystem where leaders understand ER. I think
You, you,
beautiful
you know,
point.
Gatek, there is a concept of respect for people, right?
Right.
Values as a part of an organization, values of respect for people. I don't think that you need to teach people. As a value, Make My Trip says that, respect for people is important for us. We value that. We demonstrate it via behavior. We reward people for
Mm,
that. We may not really
mm.
punish people for anything else, but if somebody is violating this, then I think that you take it very strongly, and that's the way to really teach people in the organization. Similarly to EI, what you were talking about. Yeah.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Love it, love it, love it, Yuvraj. Thank you so much. This has been for me. I've taken about 4 pages of notes, so I've got a lot to take back and maybe share with the community later. But as we bring this Leaders Cafe to a close, why nurturing first-time managers is key to business success, could I invite you as a parting thought, as a closing thought? What is the one piece of suggestion or advice? What is the one suggestion that you want to offer fellow HR practitioners who are watching this? A suggestion on what can they do differently to address this challenge of first time managers. What would that one suggestion be, Raj?
So I think, Gatik, many of things what we spoke in last 40 minutes, any of those can really be way for the managers to look at. uh, I would only say that, uh, don't let the focus go away from the spine of the organization or the midriff. I think there are certain things what you do you get accolade for, it gets counted in the short term, doing many programs which can give you a lot of man days, and also some great initiatives around frontline managers or the senior leadership programs and all, which can give you good headlines in the organization. But what will give you great reward and great dividend for the organization will be certain things which may not really get headline, but have a very, very deep and uh, deeper impact on the organization, and you will leave a legacy in terms of working on those. So for me, working on the first time manager is leaving a great legacy for the organization, which people will remember even when you leave the organization, rather than really looking at something which is short termish and may give you a headline in the organization. That's how I would give as an advice or thought, Gatik.
Wow, wow, that is interesting. I'm sure some people are smiling listening to this because you kind of touched a very important nerve there for many of us, which is, and I love this. And I think if I could take a closing message from you, the closing message is really, as HR practitioners, as learning practitioners, focus on building a legacy rather than building headlines only. Love that. And on that note, Yuvraj, thank you so much for taking out 45 minutes of your precious time to come and share with us and with our community your views and your insights and your perspectives on first time managers and their development. I love this conversation, especially because it came right from the heart. I know you told me, Gatik, I'm going to go free balling. I'm just going to talk what comes to my heart. And that's what I love the authenticity and the vulnerability you displayed in being truly honest with unprepared thoughts that came to you. So thanks once again, Yuvraj, for making time,
Thank you
and
so
look
much.
forward to having you some other
Thanks.
time and make conversation.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Gatik. Thanks a lot for really getting this conversation going. And, I always say that, uh, some people bring good in you, some people bring best out of you. So when it comes to chat, more than the speaker, I think the anchor is important who can bring best out of you. So I think that thanks for being very, very, friendly. Thanks for being very, very thought provoking. And thanks for really bringing out whatever thoughts could come out. So credit to you equally. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks a
Yuvraj. You
lot.
take care. We'll catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks.